Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to In the Fighting Chair, another exciting installment. Uh, During this period of time where everybody's been stuck at home, we've been very fortunate to bring you some amazing guests. Uh, we are Living Sharks Museum, residing in little downtown Westerly, Rhode Island, and we are telling the story of the shark from many perspectives. Uh, from the shark history perspective to shark exploitation to conservation and shark science. Today I'm excited to bring to you the renowned Carl Gottlieb, screenwriter of Jaws, most commonly known for his work on Jaws, and writer on Jaws 2 as well, and many others. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We don't want to just talk about him as a writer. We also want to talk about him as an actor. So I'm going to bring Carl on without further ado. And welcome, Carl.
Hello, there we are. Look at us.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's good.
Adjusting my little pillow here to give me a proper elevation. Okay, there we are.
You certainly look very comfortable.
I am.
Where are you hailing from today?
I am in my home in West Hollywood, California. We may be interrupted by my cat who jumps on my lap from time to time, but that's well and good. That's her job. So we don't complain.
Well, we welcome it. What's your cat's name?
Frida.
Frida. Where did you grow up, Carl?
I grew up in New York City. I was born and raised in Manhattan. And there she is. See, the minute I get involved in something, she's interested. Say hello to the people. Okay. She'll settle. Yeah, just settle down. There we go. Okay. I grew up in New York. I went through the New York public school system. I went to CCNY, which was one of the great municipal colleges of all time. I went there for a couple of years, and then I just got tired of taking public transportation to school, which I had done for 4 years of high school, 2 years of college. So at that time, I decided to go to a college with a campus and a football team and fraternities and sororities and all that stuff. So I transferred to Syracuse, where I majored in journalism and theater arts. And then when I graduated from Syracuse, I made a vow to myself that I would only work in what I trained for. I'm going to write or be in show business or some combination of those things. I'm not going to be a bartender or a cab driver or a merchant marine guy. I'm not going to drive a truck. I am going to be in show business. And, for many years, that meant the best salary I ever made was $25 a week in meals, doing lights and sound in a Greenwich Village coffee house. But, I did all that. And then I got drafted. I went in the Army. And when I got out, my friend had got a job in a new theater that had opened in San Francisco, a improvisational company called The Committee. So I joined them as a stage manager right after I got out of the service. And then I stayed there for a couple of years. I went on to Broadway for a season, worked there, and came back as an actor this time on stage. And that was a fabulous 2 years. I was working in San Francisco in a hit show from 66 to 68, Haight-Ashbury, Summer of Love, Berkeley, Free Speech, all that stuff. And then the show went to LA, and we opened in Los Angeles on the Sunset Strip, where we got really great reviews across the board. We got it in the consumer press, the LA Times, the Herald Examiner loved us. The alternative press, the Free Press, and the Avatar, they loved us. And the trade press, the Daily Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, They liked us. So we were a hit. And being a hit in LA means from there, it's just a short jump to television and the movies. And I made that transition and started to accumulate the stuff that you know me for, which is Jaws and Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, which I also worked on, Caveman, which I wrote and directed, and some other movies, which I'm very proud of. So there you go. That's
So you,
history.
so you studied theater. I'm sorry. You studied theater arts, but did you have a particular goal in mind early on that you wanted to be an actor more than a writer?
No, I just wanted to be in show business. When I was in high school, I went to high school about 6 blocks from the theater where Sid Caesar and Your Show of Shows was broadcast from live every week, 36 weeks a season. And after school, I would walk down, watch the stars come through the stage door, and say to myself, someday I will be breezing through a stage door. And that was the origin of it.
And so you did. And you won an Emmy for your work on the Smothers Brothers.
Yes.
How did that change your career?
It was interesting because in those days, the status was in feature films, and television was something you did for money. But when I got an Emmy, and the show was kind of a cutting edge show for its time, and the years that I was on it, 68, 69, it was the hippest show on television. It was a Saturday Night Live of its time. They were doing the most cutting edge stuff. They were doing a lot of political satire, which is what I did in the committee. So it was a natural fit and a natural evolution. So I was writing television. We got an Emmy. The show was canceled for a variety of reasons, having nothing to do with the quality. We were in the top 10 when we were canceled. And then I stayed in television. I got a job producing commercials for a year or so. I worked as an actor on, Mork and Mindy and Beretta, Universal Studios. I was a working Hollywood guy. And then I was friends with this new kid in town. We both had the same agent, Mike Medavoy at ICM, who put us together, and we got on well. And I acted in a small parts, improvising my part in 2 Spielberg television movies. And then when he got Jaws, he asked me if I would do the rewrite. And at that time, I was working on The Odd Couple. I was story editor of The Odd Couple on ABC with Jack Klugman and Tony Randall. So on one day's notice, I quit that job, got on a plane with Steven to Boston where he was casting extras. It was 3 weeks before start of principal photography. We tore the script apart and rewrote it while we were shooting it. And all this is described in my book, which I should hold up on screen now, but I don't have it. Maybe you'll do it.
That's okay. I can do it.
The Jaws Log,
That's right.
best-selling book about the making of a movie ever, still in print. And everything I'm telling you here is in the book. So if you feel that you've missed any part of it or you want to know more, please buy the book. And I got to ask you that I mean, there may be a couple of times you ask a question where I will say, "Oh, please, it's in the book. Just go to the book." Ask me something I haven't been asked 100 times in the last 45 years.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for.
Me too.
Can you tell us a little bit about the title "Stillness in the Water" and where that originates from?
I think that was one of the titles that Peter Benchley came up with. The evolution of the screenplay was that Peter wrote this best-selling novel. Zanuck and Brown optioned it to make a film of it. They convinced the studio to back it. And part of Benchley's deal was that he gets to write the screenplay, or at least the first draft, before they replace him. So he wrote a first draft and toyed with a bunch of different titles, including, I guess, Stillness in the Water, Jaws of the Leviathan. There's a bunch of possibilities. And then somebody said, well, why not just Jaws? And the rest is history.
So Mr. Spielberg hands you this draft and it says eviscerate.
Yes.
What kinds of things did you have to remove to make it manageable for yourself?
Well, there was an enormous amount of underbrush that we had to cut away. There's a whole subplot about the mayor and the mafia and real estate development and all of that. When it was, as far as Stephen and I were concerned, it was a tale of high adventure and some municipal corruption that brings these three guys together to battle this shark. And once we decided to get rid of all the subplots and the extraneous stuff, we had a very efficient story, which is what we went with, and what I got to write.
Did you work off any sort of writer's model to further develop the characters that had already been created by Benchley?
Well, you got to remember in 1974, there was only a few books. There was Sid Field's book. There was a guy named Robert McKee who used to do classes in screenwriting. And William Goldman wrote a great book called Adventures in the Screen Trade. But no, there were no models. We basically took the script apart and worked. The first thing we worked on was an outline so that we would at least know where we were going. And we started the movie with 3 pages of typing paper scotch taped together to make a long scroll, which hung over my desk in the house that we shared on Martha's Vineyard. And there was a shooting schedule that we kind of had to follow. So if they were shooting the beachfront scene, the campfire scene, which I think was the first scene shot, I had to write the dialogue for Chrissy and for the kid and the deputy and Scheider. So I wrote those first. Basically, I was writing whatever was not yet shot, So we were working when we started the film, when we started the first day of photography, we had 6 pages of dialogue for the principals in the campfire scene and an outline for the rest of the movie. And that was it. And Verna Fields, who won an Academy Award for editing, was an integral part of every discussion, every dinner, every conversation we had about the movie, because eventually she was the one who was going to have to put all these disparate pieces of film together. And because she had an editor's eye and ear for story construction, she and Steve, she kind of was mentoring Stephen. It worked out between the 3 of us. We fashioned the script as you saw it, as you see it now. And Stephen would ad lib with the actors. I would ad lib sometimes, but the actors would ad lib. But ultimately, we wrote a movie and shot it and got lucky.
So how much of what is on screen is ad-libbed and how much of it is what you've put down on the paper?
A lot of it is, a lot of it is scripted. And in some cases, for a while, I was very self-effacing. I didn't take complete writer's credit. I said, look, the actors did a lot. Stephen is the auteur of the film. I say that in the book. I point out how Stephen completely shaped the movie. But there's great chunks of the movie that were shot as written, and I'm very happy for that. And it was kind of seamless how it all came together. Just recently, there was a piece in the New York Times called Mrs. Kintner and President Trump or something. It's about the scene where the woman slaps Scheider. I was really proud of that scene. That was written the night before we filmed it. Lee Fierro was a great actress. She delivered the goods. She delivered the speech. She slapped the shit out of Roy.
Yes, she did.
And it's a perfect scene. It worked as written. The scene, the dinner scene, where Dreyfus comes to the chief's house and interrupts dinner, brings a couple of bottles of wine. The stuff with the kid was ad lib because the kid was making those faces. And,
Okay.
and Roy went to the director, he went to Steve and said, look, watch this. The kid is mimicking what I'm doing. And sure enough, Steve said, great, we're going to shoot it. So we did. So you had that kid going, making that face.
Yeah.
It was really weird to see that guy grown up in Martha's Vineyard. He would still make that face for anybody who asked him to. I think he recently died. And Lee Fierro just died at 92.
Yes, she did.
Very sad to see her go.
Sad news to hear, yes.
Because she's one of the few left alive.
And she was another lifer when it comes to acting and theater.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's great to hear you're still writing as well from the bio that you sent me.
I'm actually avoiding writing, but yes. I used to describe my job as writing, rewriting, avoiding writing, writing, rewriting others, and avoiding writers, and being rewritten myself. Somebody else would rewrite me. That's the life of a screenwriter.
Did you end up having to do any technical work, any technical research, say on shark history for the work you were doing?
Well, I read. We didn't have that much at that time. There was not much research. There was this one guy who's credited in the film, Frank Campagno, from the Scripps Institute, in oceanography down in San Diego. And there were some books written. I don't remember the titles, but I read everything that we had, and I had a lot of things that I had to research quickly. I mean, the autopsy stuff, I had to suddenly write like a doctor.
Right.
For the shark stuff, I had to write like a shark expert. And for the actors, I had to write like an actor. I had to give them good stuff to say and jokes. Humor is an important part of that movie.
Well, that's a big part of your background too, right? So essentially, you come from an improv and comedy background.
I was always a comedy guy.
Now, are you responsible for a lot of the little idiosyncrasies that we see? For instance, Roy Scheider always hitting his head, and just some of these noteworthy tics that the characters have.
Some of those were the actors' choices. Dreyfus basically was an actor. He would say the words that were given to him. Shaw was the same way, classically trained actor. But the Indianapolis speech, which everybody remembers, Robert Shaw wrote that himself based on input and different versions of that speech. Howard Sackler, who is uncredited, but who wrote the intervening draft, it was the Sackler script that Stephen saw that he wanted to direct and that he wanted to rewrite. So the Sackler script was the one that introduced the Indianapolis story, and then it got refined and changed. And I'm still learning about the Indianapolis because it's been covered. They've done a TV movie about it, and one of the fans, somebody like yourself, who's out there, who's a Jaws fanatic, referred me to a book called Shark Attack, in which the episode of the guy, Herbie, the bosun's mate, who was when he turned over, he had been gutted by the shark.
Right.
That was in a book called Shark Attack 20 years before Jaws. Sackler found it in his research and put it in the script. And of course, never attributed it. But I'm happy to say it wasn't any of us. It was good research. If the writer, it's to the writer's credit if you can find it and make it work in the script. You don't have to create it out. You don't have to make it up entirely, but how you integrate it into the story, that's your job as a screenwriter. That was my job anyway.
Did you get a chance to see the PBS documentary when they found the Indianapolis?
No, I didn't.
I think that was last year. They did manage to find the wreck of the Indianapolis, and it's available online. You can watch the video. It was a live feed, and they sent an ROV down to go explore the wreck. And it's hundreds of feet down, and it's barely unchanged. It's amazing footage.
Huh. I'm gonna have to go look at it. Great.
I'll try
On
to find
YouTube or
that.
Netflix, or where do you know where it
Yeah,
is?
you'll be able to find that on YouTube. I'll look for a link for you, and I'll send it along.
Thank you. Send me the link. That would be great.
Did you watch Blue Water, White Death in your research?
Yes, I saw Blue Water, White Death. I met the Taylors. The Taylors came up to the vineyard at one point. Yeah, that was probably the extent of my knowledge, was Blue Water, White Death, and the books that I read.
You spent a lot of your time in the cabin.
Yes, the log cabin.
But you did spend a little bit of time in the water.
Yes.
So
One of the
can we talk about a scene that never made it into the film?
Yeah.
Where
In the script that I started with, my part was much bigger, because when Stephen asked me to come on board, he said, his first notion was that he would hire me as an actor, as he had done before, and I would go on location and help out with improvising dialogue, work with the actors, just do what I did as a comedy writer. But I was hired as an actor first. And then somebody's at my door and I don't know who. So I'm going to find out. I don't believe I'm expecting anybody. Let me see. Hi, I'm doing an interview.
I don't care.
Okay. All right. So I was hired as an actor. I was going to improvise. And then Stephen said, I've got this house that they rented for me. You should live in the house because we can talk, whenever we're not shooting, we can talk about the script. So I said, great. And that's how we proceeded. But when I picked a part, I picked the part of the editor of the newspaper who conspires with the mayor in the cover-up. And if you look at the release print of Jaws, not any of the DVDs or the Blu-rays that came after, but the actual release print and the first VHS cassette of Jaws, you look at the credits, I get equal billing with Murray Hamilton and Lorraine Gary. That's how big the part was. It was Jaws, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Roy Scheider, and the next card was Carl Gottlieb, Lorraine Gary, also starring Carl Gottlieb, Lorraine Gary, and Murray Hamilton.
Mhm.
And in the script, there was a scene where the editor of the paper goes out in the boat with the oceanographer in a small boat and discovers Ben Gardner's boat floating in the ocean with a chunk taken out of it. And as it turns out, a dead Ben Gardner in it. So in the scene as written, in the scene that I signed up to play, that we filmed, it was, second or third week, we are in a small boat on the ocean. There's the wreckage of Ben Gardner's boat floating. It's a daytime scene. We pull up. I reach out. Dreyfus is piloting the boat. Actually, Dreyfus didn't know shit about boats. So Freddie Zendar, who was our, nautical advisor, was crouched out of sight, operating the boat from below deck, along with the sound man. And we pull up alongside Ben Gardner's boat. I reach over to pull us to tie the two boats together so that we can go on board and discover the dead body. And this is being filmed, with 3 cameras, and a British BBC documentary crew is also filming that day. So as we pull up, everything's going just the way we rehearsed it. I lean over the side of the boat to grab the other boat. My center of gravity shifts, and I go head first, ass over tea kettle into the water. All of it on camera, filmed. It's an outtake. So now I am soaking wet, and because I'm a secondary character, they don't have doubles and triples of my wardrobe. They don't have another suit like the one I'm wearing. They don't have another shirt and tie like the one I'm wearing. So to wait for that my costume to dry would have been a 4-hour waste of a $100,000 shooting day. So we said, fuck it, we'll come back, we'll do it another time. So we dropped the scene and then never got back to it. And then when the movie was almost finished, we still had that scene left to go. Steven said, fuck it, we'll shoot it on the back lot. We'll make it a nighttime scene. It'll be scarier. So that's what happened. We got back to LA, went up on the Universal back lot, fogged it in, got another boat to play the part of Dreyfus's boat. And the nighttime, and it's the biggest shriek in the movie. And it's always been great. And I'm not in it anymore.
No. Well, you are in it, and you're a beloved character. And you can read more about that particular story in the Jaws log, of course.
You might open this picture. I think there's a picture of me going in the water.
Yeah, there is. I don't know if I can get it up. But,
Yeah.
We'll see if I can bring it up a little later. Okay. So yeah, we were wondering if that was, intentionally going to be a day for night shot, or what the original plan for that was.
It was originally day for day, in which the police chief and the editor of the paper discover the guy bitten in two. And then it turned out to be much scarier the way Steven envisioned it. And of course, the actor who played Ben Gardner, Craig Kingsbury, forever after would say, what kind of a shark bites a guy and then spits the head back into the boat?
Yeah.
When you think about it, there's real
Details.
logic boggle there, but everybody buys it, and it's such an effective scare scene. It's one of the great screams in movie history. And for the year the movie came out, Stephen and I and my then wife, Allison, we'd be out for dinner. We'd look at our watch and we'd say, oh, it's going to be time for the head. We would drive to a theater in Hollywood where Jaws was playing. The manager would let us in, and we'd stand in the back and watch the head pop out. and the whole audience, you'd watch 1,200 people go, whoop. They jump in their chairs. And that scene was, even that scene was a reshoot of a reshoot, as we describe in the book, where it was shot, that actual moment was shot in Verna Fields' swimming pool in the valley on Costello Street out in Van Nuys, because Stephen wasn't satisfied with the way it was when it was shot in the tank or shot at the lake. So he went back and did it again, and boy, did he get it right.
It's definitely one of the most iconic scenes in the film, that jump scare.
Yeah.
What other scenes did you unfortunately have to cut yourself out of? Anything you can remember that was noteworthy?
No, the rest of the time, there's the town. I don't know, I might have had a few more lines in the town hall meeting. The scene on the ferry boat was pretty much as written. That was going to be my big scene, but turned out not to be.
In the drink.
Yeah, there's very few outtakes of Jaws. I mean, even the Blu-ray edition, when they were scouring the vaults for material, there was only a few scenes that didn't make it into the movie. The one with Quint buying piano wire and intimidating a 10-year-old in the music store, and my scene with the boat. Not much else. Not much else.
You mentioned in the Jaws log that around 1974, you actually had 5 scripts sold, but they hadn't seen the light of day yet. Do you recall any of those scripts and where they may have ended up? Did they see the light of day?
No. No, there was stuff I had gotten paid for, but I mean, in Hollywood, you're unemployed most of the time, and for every script that's produced, in those days, for every script that was produced, there might have been 100 scripts. Now, since every university in the country is offering film studies, and everybody wants to come to Hollywood, the screenplay has replaced the great American novel as the thing that everybody wants to write. So there's a million screenplays out there, including a few of mine, but
out there floating around.
Yeah.
Did your Jaws credit make things easier or harder for you as a writer?
Oh, easy, please, easier. I mean, once you're attached to an icon, there's a lot of magical thinking in Hollywood. So anybody who's connected with a hit, it doesn't have to be Titanic or Jaws, it can be any hit. There's a feeling that some of the magic rubs off. So even guys like, Teamsters and camera assistants and production office coordinators, if you're on a hit picture, it makes it easier to get your next job. Everybody says, "Oh yeah, you worked on that." It's like a calling card. Yeah, no, after Jaws, it changed my life as a writer. I never had, well, between 74 and 75, before Jaws came out, I was working regularly in television because I had to make a living.
Right.
I worked on 4 Flip Wilson specials and had the opportunity to work for and create material with Lily Tomlin and Robin Williams and Richard Pryor, people with whom I kept a professional relationship, for years afterwards. My second film, my next film after Jaws was a Richard Pryor movie called Which Way Is Up, and which kind of reestablished me as a comedy writer, didn't typecast me as a genre horror writer, which I'm very happy about because it kept my comedy cred.
Right. That was going to be my next question, whether or not you ever had any fears of being typecast after the work of Jaws.
I had fears of it, but then I realized, wait a second. John Voight had a whole second career once he started playing villains. So there's a lot to be said for typecasting. It actually helps you. It actually helps you work. Now, it's a little frustrating for the artist to be asked to do the same thing over and over again. I mean, I was offered a movie called Paws about a bear that terrorizes the Pacific Northwest. Which I
How come you didn't take that one?
No, I didn't take that one. I didn't take Orca either, the Dylan De Laurentiis ripoff.
But it was offered to you?
No, I don't think Paws was offered to me. I don't think De Laurentiis, or if he did, my agent poo-pooed it, shot it down. So,
How
even
did you
Jaws
feel?
too.
Yeah.
Zanuck and Brown were stingy bastards, and they offered me Jaws 2 for scale after I had worked on the biggest picture of all time.
Yeah, of course.
And I turned them down. I told my agent they're going to be back and it's going to cost them. And sure enough, they started Jaws 2 with a different director and his wannabe screenwriter wife. And 2 weeks into principal photography, they shit-canned the script, fired the director, came to me and said, "Can you help?" Which I did. So, and the rest, so I wound up doing Jaws 2 for a lot of money.
How about Jaws 3?
Also a lot of money. Also under the same conditions. They started without me, got into trouble, and the studio said, "Stop fucking around, get Gottlieb." And that gives my agent a great bargaining leverage.
Sure.
And the thing I love about Jaws 3D, it's not a great movie, and it was done on the cheap. And Alan Landsberg was a stingier producer than Zanuck and Brown, and the picture suffered because of his cheapness. But the upshot was, I met a woman on that picture who's still my friend to this day, who I had a great relationship, who I love. And if it wasn't for Jaws 3D, we never would have met. So there's always a little rainbow in the storm.
And of course, you've probably heard there's some chatter out there in the internet about a Jaws remake. I don't want to hear about a Jaws remake. You can't remake Jaws.
As long as Spielberg is alive, it'll never happen. Spielberg
I like your confidence.
Spielberg Steven has no contractual control over the property. Wendy Benchley, the estate of Peter Benchley, owns the rights to the novel and the movies. MCA Universal owns the movie outright. Steven has a small percentage of 1.5 points that he got as a director, but he has no contractual control over what the studio does with Jaws. However, they built him a compound on the studio. They have financed his development deals. Sid Sheinberg was his mentor and brought him into the business. So nobody is going to do anything that displeases Steven Spielberg. And as all of us who worked on the picture feel, hey, we got it right, whether by guess or by God, or by sheer fucking talent or willpower or an accident of history, cultural times, we got it right. You can't duplicate that kind of success. So just, accept it and go with it and take the benefits that come from it. And yeah, I'm the guy who wrote Jaws, and I can write your movie too. That's where I'm at.
Do you have any advice you would give to new or young screenwriters that are trying to break into the industry?
Yes. First thing is, be prepared to be unemployed. You will spend most of your life, most of your professional life and your personal life, you're going to spend it unemployed. That's just a fact. You may get lucky. You may have some pictures produced. You may become in demand. You might get to direct your own script. as many writers have done, and you may make a ton of money, but that's not, I mean, that may be a motivation, but it's not reality. I mean, it's, well, it's like those things where they say, look to the left, look to the right by graduation, two of you are not going to be here. So the odds are even greater against you in film. So number one, be prepared to be unemployed, have something else you can do, or have a lifestyle that you can sustain in between jobs. Yeah, you might get $500,000 for a movie, but for the next, you might have to live on that for 3 years. So save your money. That's another piece of advice. And for many years, the big money was in television. It didn't used to be that way, but the big money was in television. Create a television show, and you'll make more than anybody except maybe Steven Spielberg or James Cameron or a few other people. If you want to make $1 billion, be Jerry Seinfeld or Larry David. Don't try to be Steven Spielberg. Well, first of all, you can't. There's only one of him. There's other showrunners. There's other hit television shows. There's only one Spielberg.
That's true. It's all great advice.
So the advice to new writers, and the other thing is keep writing, because the great thing about screenplays, unlike actors in show business where you depend on auditions, you have to be seen, you have to have a showcase, somebody has to see you to hire you. The screenplay, anybody can pick it up. It might be in the bathroom at a studio, and somebody picks it up to read while they're in the toilet, and they goes, "Hey, this is pretty good. Why wasn't this made?" And then one day you get a phone call saying, "We want to make this movie." It's that simple. Now the times have changed with streaming budgets. Nobody makes $30 million movies anymore. Every movie is either $5 million or $120 million or $300 million. So the choices of what films get made has radically changed, and I don't understand today's market. I mean, I look at the films that are out today and I have no idea how they got made. And then when you explore them and you read the publicity and you read the actors or the directors or the producers talking about the movie, you realize what an incredible crapshoot it was that the movie even got considered, much less funded and produced and distributed. So it's a crapshoot, and you have no control outside of being able to write. So keep writing, because you never know when somebody will find one of your scripts. It's a thing. It exists separate from you. You don't have to be in the room to sell your screenplay. You have to be in the room to sell yourself as an actor. But, screenplay is your calling card. Director has to have a movie. You can't get hired as a director without having a reel. And it's a measure of Steven Spielberg's genius, is that when everybody else who was 25 years old in 1973 was making student films to try to get hired as a director, they were black and white, they were 16 millimeter, they had soundtracks with a guitar and a piano. They were student films. Steven's quote student film deliberately was shot in 35 millimeter color with a professional crew, attractive young actors that would appeal to the youth market. It was a very calculated move to create the most commercial calling card film that any student filmmaker has ever made. And Sid Sheinberg saw it and hired Steven as a contract director at Universal. And the next thing he directed was like A Name of the Game with Peter Falk, and then eventually led to Duel, which established his reputation as a director in Europe, if not here. So you know, he was a genius early, and he was recognized as a genius early. So that explains him. Sorry.
That's right. Well, thank you, Carl. I want to run through some questions from all of the folks at home.
Okay.
Here's one from Ross Williams. What is Carl's favorite all-time screenplay?
My favorite screenplay is a very obscure black and white film from the 30s. David O. Selznick production called Prisoner of Zenda, based on a novel by Anthony Hope. Ronald Coleman, David Niven, Raymond Massey, C. Aubrey Smith, Madeline Carroll, and Mary Ann. It's just a wonderful, sentimental, swashbuckling movie. and my favorite modern screenplay might be, well, Godfather 1 and 2 as a compendium.
This one is just a comment, but it brings a question to my mind. Bruce says, always kind of wondered why Quint didn't have a mate. What about that little gentleman and the little animal that palled around with Quint?
He did have a mate. He's in the movie. You can see him when they're loading the boat. He's a little guy carrying a load of rope and stuff. And he was a local actor named Herschel, who was, wait a second.
Call from Keith Joyner.
Just
Call
don't worry about it.
Joyner.
We're not worried.
What was the question? Was
The mate.
the mate? Yeah,
Quint's mate.
he turned out not to be able to read a line. He was, you couldn't use him on film. He looked great, but he couldn't talk. No, that's an outtake. I think he's on the outtake reel of him saying something. But and for the story purposes, we didn't need a mate. We needed just 3 guys, so a mate would have been superfluous. So even in the script, we left the mate on shore. So to answer the question, Quint had a mate. We dropped him.
Who decided that Robert Shaw should sing Spanish Ladies?
Shaw did. We were looking for a song that was in the public domain, so we wouldn't have to pay any music royalties. And Shaw said, well, in England, I think I did, he did Robin Hood or something in England. And he said, this was a public domain song.
Yeah.
And he sang it for us. And we said, yeah, right, do that.
Okay.
But
Buccaneers.
Yeah. Did it come from Buccaneers?
Buccaneers, 1956, yeah.
There you go. We used stuff wherever we could find it. Same with Show Me the Way to Go Home. That's a public domain song.
All right, well, I thought I might have a bunch of questions, but it's a lot of people saying, please, no remake.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you very much for coming on and chatting with us tonight. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime soon. I look forward to seeing where your new projects are headed.
Okay.
And
Well,
let's
you
keep
let
in
me know.
touch.
In the meantime, don't buy shark fin soup. Don't encourage the Japanese to do what they're doing. Buy the Jaws log in its latest edition with all this new information in it. Just remember, it's always Shark Week somewhere on the planet.
Yes, it is. It's every week here in Living Sharks Museum.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you again, Carl, and we'll chat soon.
Okay.
Have a great evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to In the Fighting Chair. This was a lot of fun to have Carl Gottlieb on the show. looking forward to some future guests. Keep an eye on our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter for any of the events we have coming up. While you're all stuck at home, hopefully we can keep producing some educational content about shark history and shark future, the conservation issues at hand, which Carl actually happened to bring up at the end of the interview. So again, thank you for listening. We hope to see you back here again soon. I'm Keith Cowley, curator, Living Sharks Museum, and we'll see you again soon.